It comes and goes. We're out here chasing a feeling up high.
Hello,
down
everyone.
low.
Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Becky McNetton, along with host Tara Martini. We're so glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health today.
Becky, my dear, I am so thrilled for today's episode because our incredible listeners are in the driver's seat.
And we like that the best.
Yes, we do.
When our listeners are the ones who give us the ideas for the shows.
Yes.
Of course, we do their questions on one of our whole segments, but
Yes.
that they're in the driver's seat is amazing.
Yeah, they basically made today's script.
Love it.
So today's all about curiosity, and we love curiosity.
Yes, we do.
And it's all about what they've been wondering about, which we literally talk about in our intros and outros, about the world of therapy.
Yeah.
So this is a place for them to ask questions about things they've been wanting to ask. And maybe they want to ask their therapist, but maybe they just haven't felt comfortable.
Yeah.
So,
and we've compiled these over the course of time. So listeners,
Yes.
you've sent us questions about the therapy experience, particularly for those of you who have never been in therapy before, or some people who are and had questions about, what if I want to know something about my therapist? So,
Right.
so we've compiled these and turned them into a whole show.
Yes, which I think is pretty incredible. So this is your time if you're like, wow, I submitted a question months ago
Yeah.
and they've just ignored me. This is your time.
Yep.
So I thought we're going to answer a lot of questions. First, the first segment, rather than just doing questions and answers, took some of them and turned them into myths and truths.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of myths about therapy out
There
there,
are.
and we wanted to address a couple of them. The first one is you can only go to therapy if something's wrong.
Which I think is a massive misconception. It is, please know, therapy is not just used as this remedy if you have a diagnosis or a tragedy, happens to you.
Yep.
It can help guide and support people through life's transitions. And we had an episode, on transitions
Yep.
and certain circumstances, as well as things like personal growth.
Yep.
Or like last episode, personal perception, self-perception. You don't have to have something wrong.
Exactly. Which leads to the second myth of I must be weak if I need to see a therapist. I should be able to do this on my own.
And so many people think that idea of seeking help is a weakness. And that is so not true. Seeking help shows signs of both bravery and you're being resourceful. If we think about like a basic example of learning to ride a bike, you had to continuously practice to strengthen those abilities and that skill. And you had someone guiding you as you went. You did not just hop on a bike and just go at it.
Right.
The same is true for your mental wellness. You need someone to guide you, and that person guiding you is a therapist.
And you and I are hugely biased in believing that we can't do life alone.
Absolutely.
So you don't need to do it on your own because actually nobody can.
Right.
The third myth, therapists just listen as you talk about your childhood. We've gotten questions about this.
We have.
And I think this is a very thought of concept.
I do. And I think it's not just will you talk about it, or it will all come down to my childhood, that we can never talk about current stuff. But the truth is therapy is often goal-oriented and action-focused, where yes, we may address both past things, but we also talk about current issues. A struggle you're currently having, stressors in your current life. We address both things.
Right. Yeah. Therapy isn't necessarily the image of I'm sitting on a couch and I'm talking about my childhood, and all of the things are problems connected to my childhood.
Yes, not everything goes back to past traumas.
It can.
It can.
And it may interweave, but I love how you talk about that it can be goal oriented, it can be action focused, and often does bring in like our daily life.
Yes.
People are talking about their recent week in therapy. We are going to take a short commercial break. We're going to come back and talk about 2 more myths. But for right now, stay tuned as we answer questions. We're going to take a short commercial break, and then we'll come back and talk through all the rest of this. Your questions in just a moment.
Trying to find what you lost. You can't go it alone. Express yourself.
Welcome back, everyone. It Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I am Becky McNatt, along with Tara Martini. I want to dive right back into our 2 therapy myths in this broad topic of questions our listeners have for therapists. And all the questions you maybe have wanted to ask but haven't had answered around therapy. And so let's finish up these last 2 myths that we were going through. Myth: there is no need for therapy when you can simply talk to friends or family.
Here's the thing. Friends and family are amazing to have as your support system, and obviously go to them for sure for guidance and support and things like that. But it is also amazing to have a therapist, because therapists are trained, they are unbiased, they provide a different perspective, and they provide evidence-based care. We went to school for this. So the lens is very different.
And, I would add to that truth, sometimes your friends and family are the contributors to the things that we may need help getting insight or awareness about, and or tools on how to address. So therapy is hugely helpful with that. The last myth is therapy is too expensive.
And we hear this a lot.
Yep.
And I think it's so important to know that there are so many options out there. One, insurance coverage. We do have things, sliding scale fees, so that there's options out there where we can decrease the fees. And some companies, particularly since the pandemic, offer free online therapy, virtual options as part of their packaging.
And some people's employers have employee assistance programs where you have access to some reduced fee sessions. There is some cost to it, so that is true. I hear that.
Yes.
So in terms of questions, let's dive into those, Tara.
Let's do it.
So many of them. And the first question was, how long do I need to be in therapy?
It's a great question.
And all of them are awesome questions.
Yes, they are.
That the answer is, of course, and it depends.
Which is always an answer we say in the therapy world. It depends.
Yeah. But it's sort of in whatever it is you would like to make it. Now, some people, because of significant mental health issues, are in therapy for a really, really long time.
Correct.
And that doesn't mean that there's something that is wrong with them in needing therapy for a long time. I would say most people probably go for a period of time and then stop. And a period of time and stop. But the length of time in needing to be in therapy is something that your therapist should tell you and give you a thought about, what are we looking at here? And sometimes then someone feels a sense of resolution in one arena, and that brings up an interest in exploring a new area.
Right.
And so that might lengthen the time in therapy.
And it's also important to know, because we'll hear things like, oh, we'll have to be in this forever, like you said. But no, it's that idea of, you can have a goal, and we'll talk about goals in a little bit, in that to decrease your frequency, right? And work towards those things where you're not coming as much because you're achieving your goals. And it is something that it just really depends on the person's lived experiences on what therapy looks like and how long you have to be here. Next one is there a right way to do therapy? Here's the thing. There's no right way or wrong way to do therapy. It's so individual. And I think that's what's so important to know. And we talked about it with the myth, in the myth category, is that I think people envision you're laying on a couch and there's a very serious therapist sitting in a chair with a paper and pen, seriously taking notes and just nodding a lot. That is not how it needs to be.
And I would say to people, maybe whoever asked this question, is there a right way to do therapy? I would say there isn't a tuned way to do therapy. There may not be right or wrong. There are thousands of ways, and so many things are therapy, and we have so many different modalities that we might offer as clinicians. But there are attuned ways, and it's asking yourself, well, does this feel like it's meeting my need?
Hmm.
And I would answer to this particular person, right now, even what is attuned for us changes.
Hmm.
You might need a certain kind of therapy at
Yep.
one point in your life and then move to needing a different kind of therapy based on what is going on for you, or
Right.
the type of exploration you're looking at doing that would resonate with you at that time.
Right.
So there maybe isn't right, but there is attuned.
Hmm.
It can feel
Hmm.
settled or challenging, and that rings for you in that moment.
Hmm. And also that piece of it's the relationship you have with your therapist, in that your therapist is going to find the right things for you, the modalities to use and things like that, that's right for you in that moment or in that time or chapter of your story.
hmm So someone asked, do I have to come up with a plan for what I talk about each session? And personal style here, lots
Hmm.
of people do.
Yep.
Lots of people say, hey, I want to make the most of
Yes.
my therapy session. So I'm going to come with, here's the three things that I want to process through this week,
Hmm.
or here's the one thing that came up. There are also people who come and say, I don't know what I want to talk about
Hmm.
today. Sometimes I've even heard, I have no idea why I'm here.
Yes.
I have
Yeah.
no idea why I'm here. And I would say, if it helps you have a structure going into something that is probably vulnerable,
Hmm.
then do that thing. If it feels like that is incongruent with what you're working on, are you trying to be more flexible?
Right.
Are you working toward a space of less control? Then maybe having an idea of here's what I'm going to talk about
Hmm.
needs to be a personal challenge. That is the
Hmm.
therapy, even by itself.
Yes. And I think, going off of what you just said, it is important that if you, for example, are someone who you want to have that plan, but you're someone who's very forgetful, a little tip is I'll have many clients in their notes app, like, hey, over the course of the week,
Yes, for sure.
if you're like, oh my gosh, I want to talk to Tara about this, they'll write it down
hmm
so that when they come then to session, they have a list of like 5 things. Because I mean, I'm sure this is a common thing we all hear from our clients. Oh, I knew there was something I want to talk to you about and I can't remember.
Yes.
So that helps with that. But also, please know there's no pressure. Like, you can come to us and say, I don't know what I want to talk about today, because we as therapists like have a plan. Like, we know what and also it also is just an authentic, like, it's just going to happen.
Mhm.
Right. And that's the beautiful thing about therapy. So next, can I change the topic during a session as the client? Yes, absolutely. You can change the topic.
Mhm.
Um, if you do something called changing the topic to avoid something, the therapist will have a beautiful gift on getting us back when we need to. But you certainly can change the topic to something that, if there's something you um, all of a sudden realize, like, oh, I remember that thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Well, yeah, we'll get to it. Yep,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah.
It's
Always
your
change the topic.
time.
It's your time, people. And one of the things you highlight this beautifully, Tara, one of the things that if you're changing topics, that can even be part of the therapy, and noticing
Hmm.
patterns of, when am I changing topics? How
Yeah.
am I changing topics?
Yep.
Why am I doing that?
Hmm.
So it's cool that how those things show up get to be part of the therapy experience itself.
Yeah.
One person wondered, why do different people meet at different frequencies? Who determines that?
That is such a good question.
I love that, because sometimes finances actually determine that. So
Hmm.
sometimes
Yeah.
access to therapy is what determines it. Often this is a conversation between therapist and client on what makes the most sense in that
Hmm.
person's life. We definitely don't want therapy to ever be an added stress.
Hmm.
So thinking about that, and also what are the symptoms that are present?
Right.
What's the issue at play? And determining from that, what is a frequency that makes sense? And it often doesn't stay at that frequency.
Right.
It might be like that for a few weeks or a few months, and then it might change,
Hmm.
and it might go back again. So
Right.
so it flows.
And to kind of clarify for people, I think, so as far as frequency, we're talking about, like, are you coming once a week? Are you coming twice a week? Once a month? There is no set. I think a common one is once a week, to start out with. Um, because you want to work on establishing rapport in that relationship. And that's so important to have that consistency. But it is something too that when life happens, you may find that you need to come more than once a week
Yep.
for that short amount of time because you need that added support. And then you may find that, hey, once a month check-ins works for you. The idea is that we're working with what your life looks like
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah. And I love that this concept we highlighted our practice. Therapy is not about changing who you are.
Mhm.
It's about becoming the fullest version of you,
It is.
realizing our wholeness
Yes.
and expansiveness. One of our questions that we got was, my therapist takes notes during the session.
Yeah.
What's that for? And I loved this. I loved
Yes.
because this really gets at some personal style difference between
Yes.
therapists.
It does. And this plays into that the stereotypical, that myth of like that serious therapist just sitting there not talking and just writing.
Yeah. And there are therapists who do that.
Yes.
There definitely are. That's either how they are creating and remembering concepts to store in their minds or to document later. But really, this is some of their stylistic part coming out into the session. There are therapists who never take notes. And we work with both at even our practice.
Yep.
I would say, even sometimes through someone's professional career, they may say, oh, I went through a time where I took more notes during a session. And then I stopped doing that. Especially if people are listing names or dates of things, it helps a therapist maybe jot those down.
Yeah. And it is. And I think to also keep in mind from a client's perspective, please know that the amount of notes we're taking has it does not mean, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me if we're taking more notes, right? Or if we're not taking any notes, like, wait, why aren't you taking notes? It is all about, I take notes, very brief notes, for the fact that I will not remember by the end of the day. So I need to take just like a couple of sentences of like things that I need to remember. And mine's just simply for the fact of memory. And then the rest of the time, I'm going to have everything away.
And I know someone who felt like their therapist took copious notes and felt like the therapist wasn't even looking at them.
Yep.
And so my question back to the person who asked this is, what is that for? Ask yourself, does this bother you? And this might be a conversation to have with a therapist on, what are you using this for?
Yes.
It's okay for you to ask that.
It is okay to ask questions.
And if it's impacting the relationship or how you feel about the sessions, if it's creating a sense of anxiety for you or feels like some sort of barrier to the relationship, go ahead and say something.
Yes, which leads to the next question. How do I know if my therapist is a good fit for me? And I think you just brought up a great point of, this is such an important relationship in your life, professional relationship, that please don't just take whatever the first therapist is you get. Make sure it's a good fit. You need to feel safe enough to, if something is bothering you, to be able to say something, to say, hey, would it be okay if you took less notes? And, maybe took some notes after or whatever it is, and had a voice during session. You need to feel safe and comfortable and like yourself, because the whole point of therapy is becoming that most, like you said, the fullest version of yourself. Well, how can you do that if you don't feel safe and comfortable in your sessions?
Yeah, I love that, because having someone say, well, how do I know if a therapist is a good fit for me? Can you answer the question of, do I feel safe with them?
Yep.
That's what you're highlighting. I would add, this is such a complex determination. What is a fit? In part because who we are changes and morphs and evolves. So in some ways, it's like a good fit for me right now.
Right.
With what's going on in my life. For some people, a therapist is a good fit if that therapist has training in the thing that they're seeking therapy for.
Yes.
A good fit might be the therapist says, I work with this particular arena. And that isn't necessarily always the case, but I
Mhm.
do think that sometimes people are going into therapy knowing, I'd like to process this thing. I'm looking for someone who has some experience or training in this thing. That is going to help you, at least intellectually, maybe think about a fit.
Yes.
But so much of what you're highlighting, Tara, is where we love to hover in relationship. How does it feel to be with this person?
Right.
What's the sense I get about them? Do I feel like I can be me
Mhm.
with this person? I think those are questions that get at fit,
Mhm.
beyond the what's their degree
Right.
in, what are their areas of training, which also are very valid.
Right.
Does this person take my insurance and I need to bill
Mhm.
with that? That's going to help determine fit
Yep.
as well. But how do I feel when I'm with them?
Mhm.
And and does that feel like a person, and does this feel like a space that I could be vulnerable in?
Well, and as we have said, and the data shows that that is the single most important component of
Mhm.
productive therapy is that relationship. I also want to take note or just mention that what you said is so important about like the education or the techniques they use or modalities is that also it's so important for a therapist if you did come in and say, okay, I'm needing help with um, some trauma and I really need to find someone who does EMDR.
Mhm.
As a therapist, please know it's our obligation. Like we have to say, hey, you know what? I'm not trained in that, but I will help you find someone who is,
Mhm.
right? If that's not our specialty, we will help you find someone. We're not going to just be like, nope, I don't do that. Nice to meet you.
Right.
Um, we will find a good fit for you.
Right.
All right. My therapist asked me what my goals are. What if I don't have any? Or I have no idea what mine are.
Or if your therapist just like constantly hovers in goals. I hear that too.
Yes.
They ask me what my goals are, like every 10
Yep.
sessions.
Yep.
Um, well, what an interesting question.
Yeah.
What if I don't have any, or what if I don't know what mine are?
Well, it's just like, what if I don't know what I'm going to talk about? Right? It's the
Mhm.
same thing. You don't have to know.
Yeah. So my answer back to this person is, this could be a mutually agreed upon thing,
Yes.
that it doesn't have to be one, either the therapist decides what the goals are,
Yep.
uh, or that you decide what your goals
Mhm.
are. But if it isn't clear to you, sometimes the therapist can ask some questions around, well, if all of the things seemed like they were improving, what would you be noticing?
Right.
Sometimes we have access to some questions
Hmm.
that might help get at, where are we headed? What would
Hmm.
you love to see in your life? It's okay if you don't know what your goals are. And if your therapist asks you what your goals are and you don't have an idea, it's okay to say, I don't know.
It is okay. Yes.
It's all right to say, I could use some help with that,
Yep.
or I'm not really sure where I would like to head. Do you have ideas about
Hmm.
that? Or what are your thoughts? It's okay to engage in a dialogue about it.
Right. And like you said, there are a series of questions and things like that that can come before that, that we're not just like cold, like it's not like a cold call where you're just like, oh, hi, what are your goals? That
Right.
there's stuff before that that's transitions
And
to that.
sometimes we have to explore for a while to sit with, well, where am I right now? What am I sitting in? And that gets at this question of, how do we establish goals? Somebody asks, like, can I change them? What
Hmm.
if I meet them?
Yes. What
Uh,
do I do? Then do I just say goodbye and get up from the couch and leave?
a- and the answer to this person is, how do we establish them? Well, ideally they're mutually agreed upon. If
Mhm.
you have a therapist who isn't asking you for your input about those
Right.
things, I would say that maybe is not a relationally focused
Correct.
work. Um, can they change? Always.
Mhm.
Always. And lots of people, ideally in therapy, you would meet goals. You
Mhm.
would say, oh wow, I'm noticing X in my life, or I'm noticing this in my life, and I've seen these changes.
Mhm.
Goals don't necessarily have to be uh, uh, something that you'd think of around uh, a goal. You could say,
Right.
I want to increase my self-perception, as we
Yes.
talked about last
Yep.
week.
Yep.
Um, and maybe creating some metrics around, how might I do that? What am I
Mhm.
going to explore? If you meet them, a lot of people do end therapy.
Yes.
That is an opportunity to celebrate
Mhm.
and acknowledge and honor progress that you feel
Yes. And
you've made in your
growth.
life, and growth.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful word. If sometimes people want to choose something new.
Mhm.
So it happens both ways.
Yes. How do I know if it's working?
Well, geez.
That's a big question.
Yeah, because sometimes in therapy, you don't feel better.
Mhm.
Uh, we hear a lot as therapists, someone might leave a session and feel very drained or strained. Uh, we hear the words like, I feel worse.
Mhm.
Or it brings up something that we intentionally do that.
Mhm.
If you think about anyone creating an imagery for you, I'm a metaphor human. If you think about what it takes to garden, you have to actually till soil.
Right.
Well, we take soil that looks pretty, tap down, flat, and we actually ruin it
Mhm.
to plant seeds. So sometimes then that means that it feels not great.
It's messy.
Yeah. How do you know if it's working though? What would you say, Tara?
Well, those are my favorite moments where, well, how do you know it's working? Sometimes you don't know until the therapist is like, hey, stop for a moment. Repeat what you just said,
Mm,
right? Um, do you just realize how you reacted in that situation you just shared with me?
mhm.
And they'll go, yeah, I didn't
Right.
blah blah blah. And I'll go, tell me 3 months ago how you would have responded to that same situation. And then they have that aha moment.
Yeah. That
That is how you know it's working.
that would be exactly what I would say too. If you really first ask yourself, well, what would working mean?
Yeah.
How are you defining that word?
Right.
How do I know if it's working? Well, so you get to decide, person.
Yep.
What does that look like?
Right.
I'm assuming that it would be something around how do I know I'm making progress? Well, take a data point and take right now on whatever it is that brought you into therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and then remember back a month or 3
Yep.
months or before you started therapy, and compare them.
Mm-hmm.
And that can give you some information. And if you wonder about that, ask your therapist about it too.
Yes.
Take a moment of time in a therapy session and pause to think about, from a reflective place, what growth have you seen? It's okay to ask that.
Yeah, and it's a great time of reflection. One of the things to focus on is just this idea that therapy is a journey.
Yes.
My goodness, it's a journey. And it is about some words I took from a smart person I know across from the table. It's about meaning making
Yeah.
and it's about connection.
Mm-hmm.
It is all about connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so important things. And we kind of touched on this before. And so we already answered this about, sometimes feeling worse after a session and not better. That's part of that. It's messy,
Yeah.
right? Um, we are bringing things up, but the messiness is the beautiful part because then it ends up, that's where the work is.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
sometimes part of the therapy is learning how to care for ourselves.
yes.
And when things are messy, or when, if this person is saying, I feel worse, how are we attuning and
Hmm.
attending to our personal needs? That by itself, lots of us didn't get modeling for.
Hmm.
And so is new. That's a new
Right.
kind of learning, which also is therapy.
Right. And it can be exhausting, right? If you
Mhm.
are someone who doesn't feel your feels and who has kept their emotions bottled in their body for so long and has never expressed them, you will leave exhausted, right? If you learn to feel safe enough to express yourself
Mhm.
and to feel those feels, um, it is an emotional journey,
Yep.
um, but it's an amazing one.
Yep.
So, what if I feel like I'm a burden to my therapist? Will I be able to tell? And what do I do?
Well, I love that question because I think
Hmm.
a lot of people wonder this,
Yes.
but particularly if they feel like they are a burden to other people in
Hmm.
their life. So if you are a person who worries about being too weighty
Hmm.
with the people in your life, this probably is going to show up in the therapy as well.
Right.
I would say to the person who asked this question, or people who are asking
Hmm.
this question, ask. bring it up in a therapy session, because then you can engage in a discussion that feels very vulnerable for you.
Mhm.
What if I'm a burden to you? Would I be able to tell? The therapist is going to be able to say to you, what would it be like for you if it were? What's going on for you, and even wondering that? What's it
Right.
like for you to say that out loud to me? This is relational vulnerability in even bringing up that thought
Mhm.
that's coming up in your mind. Because if I just said to you, what if you're am I a burden to my therapist? And I say, well, you're not.
Mhm.
Well, that doesn't get at your fear that you are. I can't speak for every therapist in
Right.
this whole world.
Yep.
Um, that it more, the question is like, what does that mean about you if you were?
Mhm.
And what are you storing about you if that were to occur?
Right.
That is where the relationship happens, and that's where the dialoguing needs to
Mhm.
happen.
Yes. To go off of that, it made me realize something, that it's also important for clients to know, and this happens anytime there is something that happens within our community, um, whether it's large or small, is I will often hear from clients, "Oh, I bet you everybody's talking about this and you probably don't want to, or you're probably sick of hearing this, or are you okay hearing about this? Because this has to wear you down probably." And you hear that.
Hmm.
Please know, one, this is our job and it's an honor to sit with you in it.
Yes.
Um, this is not something we grow tired of. It's not something we have a quota of and we're like, well, nope, I've heard that 5 times today. You're the sixth. So unfortunately, we do have to change the topic. Um, no, like, it's an honor to be here and to hear your experience, and every experience is so different.
Absolutely.
But that is what we're here for. If anything, those are the exact moments we are here for, is when a community is impacted by something.
Right. Yeah. Somebody asked us, and it kind of gets at this
Mhm.
idea of burdensome. Is it okay to ask the therapist about their life?
Yes.
And can I ask them about their training? Well, we get asked lots of questions about our life.
Yes, we do.
And I would say there's a stylistic difference here too. You might
Mhm.
have a therapist right now, for those of you who are in therapy, who really does not want to answer questions
Yep.
about them. And so here's a great aspect to this question. Just because you ask doesn't mean the person has to answer. And that's
Right.
really across the board with anything in life.
Yep.
Nobody's owed your story just because they ask.
Right.
So the therapist can tell you, I'm not comfortable answering
Mhm.
that.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean that you can't ask.
Right.
So because in part there's something on your mind there.
Mhm.
And your therapist may ask quick questions about, well, what's behind wanting to know?
Right.
Really, it could be anything.
Yes.
Can I ask them about their training? Well, yes.
Yes, please do.
And even from, how does that inform the way that you do the work?
Mhm.
Or what does that training look like in our sessions? We've talked on the show a lot about, hey, bring us into a session when we do different
Yep.
modalities. Like, what's it going to look like? In part because we're trying to help people understand, here's what it might appear like.
Mhm.
But if you don't know what those things are, it's okay to ask.
Right. It is.
It's absolutely okay to ask.
And I think too, one of the things, I think this is so common where clients want to gain insight about our lives and things like that, is there is a wonderful way to learn about your therapists and their lives, or things that they treasure or value, is look around their office, right?
Mm.
You can learn a lot about someone, whether it's a teacher in their classroom or a therapist in their office, um, or the therapist and the entire, like, the lobby, right?
Sure.
Um, just take a look around and you will discover, if you take 2 seconds and you sit in my office, you're gonna learn I'm a lady that's obsessed with rocks. There's no way you couldn't know that. And that I love plants.
Mhm.
I don't need to share that with you. I do share that with you by you just being in my presence.
Yep. What
And
a
so,
beautiful idea, because it is the way of how you know about your therapist
yeah,
without even necessarily them verbalizing.
you don't have to.
And you also could sure ask, in my office, it's prisms are like all
Yes,
over the place.
yes.
And I have been asked many times, why do you love prisms?
Yep.
And I usually say, well, okay, this
Yep.
is going to take a
Yeah.
long time. Prisms are my metaphor for human beings.
Yep.
But that does help you know about a person.
Mhm.
And that's, as you and I have talked about, in terms of relationship building, that isn't only content.
Right.
That is bringing someone into our beliefs,
Yes.
our values, our
Yep.
framework on the way we see the world. That just asking them, well, what's your favorite vacation spot?
Right.
That's content.
hmm
And looking around and seeing what are the things that are present right here, you
Mhm.
learn a lot about a human being.
You
Yes.
do. Yeah. So there's a little thing that you can try out if you're, you know, trying to see if you're a good fit for therapists. Just
Mhm.
check out their office, see what you learn about them.
So one person asked, do therapists go to therapy? And
Great
and
question.
the answer to that is, I'm certain, yes.
Yes.
In a way,
Maybe not all.
yeah, maybe not all, but lots do.
Mhm.
And that's it, sometimes even for a consultation with other therapists, or they're pressing in their own lives. They're human beings.
Mhm.
We share this all the time on the show of we are also humans walking our own walk
We are.
and love the ability to partner with people in their own process. You said that it is an honor. It is the greatest honor.
It is.
We also have our own
Mhm.
with our own life experiences. It can be very important for therapists to go to therapy.
Well, and I think it's so important that it's that idea of that therapists offer a safe space to be seen and heard and supported.
Mhm.
And we as therapists also deserve to have a safe place to be seen and heard and supported because we're human beings, like you said.
Yes, great way to put it.
Um, and so that it's a lovely thing to have that space as well.
Mhm. So one person said, "Do therapists have blind spots?" And I'm laughing about this. Things they don't see.
Yeah.
Okay, I love you. Whoever
Yes.
sent us this.
Bravo.
Do therapists have blind spots? If your therapist doesn't acknowledge that they do,
Correct.
then you're meeting with a robot.
Thank you. I was just going to say, if they say they don't, they're lying.
Yes, of course we do. Because as we just
Mhm.
finished saying, we're human beings who are going to
are.
have, and you're going to get bias from me in the next in this answer. We have a framework in the way that we see the world that's called a perspective. And in that means that there's things that I'm not seeing.
Right.
I have a huge accountability to understanding myself in how that might show up as a human being, but particularly in the work I do. But I just was saying a couple of weeks ago to a friend of mine, that we actually can't see our backs.
Mhm.
Our heads do not flip that way.
They don't.
So we do require other people in our world to help us see that side of us. That means that we have huge responsibility to develop relationships with people who are going to hold us accountable to us.
Mhm.
But we are not going to be able to see all of us. I
No.
think that's even maybe one of the myths, that therapists are just this all-knowing being
Mhm.
that see every side of something and can so easily maintain neutrality about it all. And
Right.
no. There are things that we definitely don't see, and ways that we also just lots of times messily engage with our humanness.
Mhm. Beautifully said. I think that's so true. Um, can I ask my therapist? This is a big one. Can I ask my therapist what they think of me or how they feel about me?
Hmm.
It's a big one.
Yeah, and I would say absolutely.
Yeah.
In part because we just did a show
Yep.
a week ago about perception.
Yes.
If you are working on self-perception versus external perception, who better than
Mhm.
to ask, how do you come across to this world? How do you feel about me?
Right.
In what ways do I show up in this relationship? What are your thoughts, therapist, from a loving, compassionate,
Mhm.
empathic way?
Yep.
That can be hugely insight building.
For sure.
It can also perhaps get at, is this coming or rooted in a place of insecurity?
Right.
If I want to know, what do you think about me?
Mhm.
Bring it up, because what's you're actually talking about there is, I want you to like me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then you can talk about that in the therapy.
Yeah.
So if there's something on your mind, I guess it's sort of what you and I are getting at in this whole show, is say it out loud.
Say it out loud. Yep.
That is the vulnerability by itself, which is the healing journey.
Mhm.
It's being able to commit to an authenticity of how I'm showing up in this moment, and trusts another person enough that whatever it is I say, they'll be able to hold.
Yes, they will be able to hold it.
So much to think about here. We are headed to a commercial break right now, but when we come back, we will talk through a few more listener questions.
Our final
This
ones.
has been our whole show today. Feels Out Loud. We'll process those, everyone. Your thoughts, your questions in just a moment.
Express yourself. In a world full of strangers, you don't know to trust. All you see is danger, trying to find what you lost. You can't go it alone.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this part of the show is where we talk through questions from you all, our listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly. Or you can email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. Follow us on social media as well. We really, really do want to hear from you and what you're wondering about, everyone.
I am so happy that we've had a chance today to answer all these questions that listeners have had.
Yeah, keep them
Because-
coming. We might do another show.
And
on
I
it.
was going to say, and thank you for your patience, everyone. So thank you to our patient listeners who have sent in so many questions about the world of therapy. We have just room for 2 more.
Mhm.
So here's number 1. I think it would be amazing to be a therapist. Love that. But I have no idea what type of schooling is needed. What does that path look like?
Great question.
That's a great question. There are several paths you can take to becoming a therapist.
Yep.
Should we each just share how
Yeah.
ours, as far as schooling, because we did take different paths as far as schooling. So mine was, I already had a master's in school counseling. And so I just went back and finished the coursework needed to have a master's in psychology. And then I went and took the correct exams and things like that in order to complete the process. And so I did it in a little bit of a unique way.
Yeah, and what you highlight, Tara, is really kind of across the board what type of schooling. Everybody needs a master's degree,
Yes.
at least. Some people have a doctorate.
Yep.
Depending on there are kind of different degrees that people can get, but they're all master's degrees,
Yep.
sometimes doctorates. And then you're going to practice for
Yep.
a couple years.
Mhm.
So going to school takes a few years after your bachelor's degree, and then you're going to practice under a supervisor for a couple of years, regardless of your area of licensure. And so if you're interested in being a therapist, there's lots of ways to do it, but it does involve some school.
It does. And it doesn't have to be your first career.
Doesn't have to be
You
your
know,
first career. No.
You can go back, which a lot of people do.
Yep, a lot of people do.
Yep.
Our second question was, I've been working with my therapist for a few months now and just don't think that we are a good fit. Am I able to switch therapists even though I've already been with this person for 3 months?
That's a great question, because that 3 months, is like, oh, it's kind of a new
Yes.
professional relationship, but
And I hear from folks a lot.
Mhm.
Hey, I don't want to start over.
Correct.
So these the terms start over.
Yep.
And so my quick response back would be, of course you're able to switch therapists.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
I totally hear the idea of feeling like you're starting over. And maybe a different way to frame it is that person was helpful for the path
Mhm.
that brought you to this moment. You've realized that it isn't what you need right now. And so that isn't starting over, it's starting from where you are.
Right.
You're not redoing time. And finding someone who's going to be whatever you've deemed to be fit. And that would be my other thought to this person of, if you don't think that you're a good fit, take this time while you're working with a person and think about, you could sure even ask the therapist. We've had conversations like this with
Mhm.
clients. What makes it not a good fit?
Right.
Can you answer that? And in the difference between, would you know a good fit if you felt that? What might you look for
Mhm.
that's different in the relationship that you don't have yet? Because I think that's another way to say, oh, I'm not totally starting over here then.
Mhm.
I've learned something about myself in either what feels like a fit or what doesn't feel like a fit? And can I categorize that somehow so I know what I might be looking for?
Right.
And we are already at the end of our show.
We are.
Wow. Thank you for listening, everyone, this morning. Join us next week as we process through more mental health focused topics. And in the week ahead, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness. And everyone, your voice is one that the world around you needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.
Get back up and try again. Some do, some don't. Some will, some won't. I wanna feel just to live.